Let me tell you a little bit about Beacon Point if you are new to one of our webinars. We are really supportive of women in wealth. We're the largest women-led RIA in the nation. 60% of our corporate leadership team is women. And in the financial industry, that is rare. It's one of the big reasons I owned my own firm for over 30 years, joined Beacon Point about 3 years ago. And there was only one clear choice for me when I was looking to partner, and that was to be with a firm that really supported women, both on the wealth advisory side, the clients that we serve, and then as well as our corporate leadership. We have 350 professional designations and advanced degrees. Most importantly, probably being the CFP, the Certified Financial Planning, but we just have a wealth of deep knowledge to serve all of you. And really what we're trying to do with the webinars is have, a number of times throughout the year that we're pairing our wealth advisors and partners with incredible, talented professional speakers to bring value add content to each of you. All right, I'm going to talk just a little bit about Jen before we get started. Jen has 15 years, more than 15 years in leadership, coaching, facilitation, and team development. She has worked with companies such as Amazon, Kraft Foods, MasterCard. She helps people stay creative during times of change and uncertainty. And in the financial markets and landscape of the last 6 weeks, I feel like this conversation is more important than ever, and really helps us find clarity in times of chaos. So welcome, Jen.
Glad to be here.
And then a little bit about myself. I already spoke a little bit. I work as the Senior Wealth Advisor, Partner, and Managing Director in both our Chicago and Michigan locations. I have been serving clients in the financial and wealth advisory industry for 35 years this March. I absolutely love it. And I have an incredible passion for serving women, both mentoring women. We're launching for Beacon Point our women's mentorship program for all of our wealth advisors across the country. I am chairing that program and did something similar at my previous firm as well. And we serve a lot of women clients out of our office, women that have, I believe, a little bit of a different conversation. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. When I first came into the industry, I would have thought that investments or being an investment and wealth advisor was simply about money, really looking at your investments, looking at the financial markets, and that's crucial. Part of Beacon Point is a commitment to high quality institutional investments for each of the clients that we serve, but it's so much more than that. And I just want to touch a little bit on the other things that we do to help really encompass wealth management. So we want all of you to know that we're guiding you through all your major life events and transitions. I believe that talking about this subject, one of the most important pieces that we bring is being a ship in the storm, or providing that context to the conversation, or allowing that conversation to really be fleshed out to make the right decision for your life. That can be in retirement, how to retire, when to retire, how to live your best vital life in retirement. It can be going through a health or life change, selling a business, buying a business, running a business, the passing of a loved one, being married, going through a divorce, educating your children, educating your grandchildren, receiving inheritance, talking about your legacy and providing inheritance, and then, of course, building your family and building your family's legacy. Just know that the conversation is so much more in our mind as wealth advisors and our teams at Beacon Point. Our goal is anything that touches you financially, even coordinating with your CPA, especially just coming to the end of tax season. We've been putting in very long days as a team to make sure we're quarterbacking and working with your CPAs and that you're getting the most tax efficient strategies possible, coordinating with your attorneys to make sure that all of your life's work and your assets pass by your wishes, and that you're creating the type of legacy that's important to you. Really, what we try to say to the clients that we serve is anything that touches you financially, let us be that phone call. Let us either connect you with the right answer or provide you the right answer. So that ties a lot into Jen starting with going through change and transition. And I'm going to jump in a few more times with just what's been going on with tariffs in the markets as we get going.
Great. Well, I'm so excited to be here and to join you all. And as Heather mentioned, if you do have questions along the way and you want us to touch base on those at the end of the session, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. And then we have some activities we'd love for you to be engaged in the chat. So please take advantage of that. I want to start with this picture in front of you. And this is the Tanana River in Alaska, where I was born and raised. And most summers, we would travel down the Tanana River to our cabin in a remote part of Alaska on Healy Lake. And traveling on this river is tricky because the silt coming off of the melting glaciers would bring all this debris, and that silt would make these channels move and change unpredictably in the river. And so you had to figure out how to make your way through it without any sort of pre-made map, if you will. And I think that that's such a great metaphor for when we are navigating change and uncertainty, because we don't know when the path we're on is going to shift and change, or when we take a particular direction, what's going to happen. There's so much uncertainty. And as human beings, one of the things that happens to us a lot is when we're facing uncertainty, we often perceive it as a threat. And then we get into this reactive state where our body is preparing to be either in a fight state or flee. And so you're trying to avoid it. Or if it's really very much complicated and overwhelming, you might go into a freeze state. And this isn't where we want to stay, because you don't have access to your prefrontal cortex. You can't come up with creative solutions. You're really more likely to get stuck. And instead, we would like you to be thinking about, how do you move into more of a creative state? And when I talk about creativity, I'm not just meaning paintings or writing a poem. That is a creative act, but I'm thinking about it in a more broad way. So thinking about, when are you able to find the opportunities and the challenges? And when are you able to take everything that exists right now and put it together in new and interesting ways that really allows you to find a useful solution or move forward? And so that's the point of this webinar, is really using this as a frame of, how do we help ourselves and others move from that reactive state to that creative state, because the opportunities, the solutions, the ways forward are in that creative processing. And that's what we all need right now more than ever. And so I'm going to start with a reflection. Before we get to those other tools, I would love for you all to think about, what is a past transition that you've navigated in your personal or professional life? And I'd love for you to think about a specific one. You do not need to share that in the chat as to what your transition was. But what I would love you to share in the chat is, what helped you through that change? What supported you to move through that transition that you went through? So I'll wait for the chat to come up. Heather, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I'd like to jump in on this one. Jen and I were having some calls, just getting ready to be with all of you today. And I was talking about, I opened up a little bit about going from owning my own firm for over 30 years and then going into a bigger story. And of course, there was the excitement of the incredible group of people I was going to be working with and all of the additional support. But when I got there, I found myself quite afraid, just afraid of what would be different. Could we still serve our clients in the same way? Would our team still interact in the same way? And I found myself just in a state of fear and worry, more than excited, which is what I was until we arrived, and how I worked through that. And a lot of it really was reaching out, being vulnerable, being willing to talk to people about what I was struggling with, and just to gain clarity and gain peace of mind. It was a lot of walks and a lot of yoga, just a lot of getting away, going internal, and really finding my center again, and not letting the fear or worry, which ties so much to what's going on right now, get the best of me. Really staying in a place of what I could be solid with and I could have influence on.
That's a great example. And there are in the chat others saying exercise and sports. Like being physically in your body, which we're going to talk about as some of the tools that can help you, is really important. And then you'll also see that there is a number of comments around other people. So your support system, friends, family, your faith, being able to trust in yourself, and thinking about, all these other things that you have been through that, like you said, that are going to give you that belief in yourself, that trust that you can make it through it. So what I have here I did a word cloud from some of the workshops I've done in the past to surface up some of the themes that had come from that. And you're going to see some similarities to what's in the chat here today. And if you were to add up, say, friends, relationships, and support, that would be the biggest one instead of the open. So I would say definitely connection, even coming together today, is really powerful. Community and connection is really important during times of change and transition. It's important anytime, but when you're going through change and transition, those relationships are regulating. They help you think about, oh, I can make it to, that future state that I'm working towards, or be able to move through this transition. So you can just see some of these things that we're actually going to get into in terms of tools that can help you move from that reactive state to that creative state. But I just thought this was fun to kind of put it into your own context. And this in and of itself is a type of tool in that when we reflect on our past experiences and that we made it through hard times, it is giving us that reminder of we can do hard things. We've already done it in other situations. And we don't learn and grow just through action. We have to be in reflection too. So we move so fast, so many of us are moving to the next thing. And yet you do need to think back to what has supported you? What have you already made it through? The other thing that we can use as a framing that can help us during change and transitions is just to remember that our change journeys don't follow a straight line. It seems simple, and yet so many of us are hoping that our plans that we have created will work out exactly as we wanted, or that the trajectory of our careers or our lives will go in more of a straight line. And that is never the case. And yet we keep hoping for that. And it's important to keep remembering that the change journey is winding. And so if you look at this framing here, you have your growth and development in lots of different contexts. This could be, the growth and development of your career, or the organization that you're leading, or your portfolio. And then you have time. And it's never a straight line. It's in nature where there is natural cycles of growth and decline. And the only way to move forward is to adapt and reinvent yourself so that you are in that next state as a different person, as a different organization, as a different team. You have to adapt to what's there, and that requires that growth and development. And I'm going to just bring it back to that metaphor of the Tanana River, where it looks a lot like that, where you had all those different channels and the different routes that are forward, and they were not straight. So it shows up in nature, it shows up in your life, it shows up in your career. We know this intellectually, but we have to keep reminding ourselves, because we keep hoping for that straight line, or for the plan to work out exactly as we had hoped. What I'd like to do right now is go in, you can see the little box. I want to zoom in a little bit into what that curve looks like, because you do have a processing that you go through when you are going through change and transitions. The external change, maybe it's the job loss or a new job or the end of a relationship, happens. But what's tricky is the transition and the absorption of that change. It's the emotional processing that is the thing that we have to remember is so part of this process. You can't just make the change and then you're good. So the change curve is a model that is used in lots of different entities, and it's from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So if you're familiar with her, in the 1960s, she was really focused on helping people at the end of their lives. So when they would learn that they were terminal and that they were dying, she noticed a pattern of 5 stages that people would go through. Now, sometimes people will criticize these kinds of models because they're like, nobody goes through change and transition in a linear stage by stage process. And that is true. You will all go through it in different ways. It won't be a linear process. But she was identifying these points that people would experience, and it helped orient people. So similarly, I have created my own version of that change curve that's drawing on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work, as well as a number of others. And the point of this is not to predict what you will experience, because we don't know what will happen ahead. The point of it is to give you a framing to think about what it might be like and to orient yourself. So instead of thinking about these as phases or stages, you can think about them as points on a map that you'll visit for varying amounts of time, or you will jump around them as you're going through the process of your transition. So I'm going to walk through what is here. So you'll see the orange dot of the event or the stagnation. So the event, as I was mentioning, it could be a job loss or a new job, because even new exciting things will have a transition to it. Or it may be that you realize that you need a change. You're feeling stagnant, and you're going to be going through this process of shifting into that next stage or that next chapter, if you will. So when we are in this space of struggle, it's when we haven't accepted what is happening or going to happen. So we may be going through things like denial, or we're angry, or we're trying to hang on to what exists and it's changing and it's going away, or it's going to be different, and we are still holding on to what was. Struggle is a tough place to be. And yet it is one of those human experiences that we all have. It's naming the emotions, naming the experience that you're having so that you aren't ignoring it. And when you do accept what's happening or about to happen, then you can go into this space of regrouping. And regrouping is that messy middle, or what William Bridges, the author of Transitions and Managing Transitions, calls the neutral zone. And it can feel like the world around you keep moving on. You're kind of thinking, how can they keep going? Because you're feeling like you're just sitting in this muck, and you don't have a lot of motivation. Your energy may be low. And a lot of times we want to rush out of this space because it is incredibly uncomfortable. However, this is a very creative space, and it's important. A metaphor that's often used in this time is the chrysalis. So when you have a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, it doesn't just go from the caterpillar to the butterfly. The caterpillar, as you know, wraps into its cocoon, and then it melts down into the equivalent of caterpillar soup. And what's really cool is there are things called imaginal cells that are saying this is what you're going to become, and it's going to wrap that goo into and form the wings and the legs. So when you're in the goo, you can't possibly imagine yet what that might look like, but there's emerging things that are bringing all of your experiences, your strengths, your things that you can put together in a new way and become whatever that next version of yourself is. When you do start to feel like, okay, I got some more energy going, you might be in Explore, where you're starting to think about ideas. Okay, well, maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that. One of the risks at this exploratory period is that you might take on too much too soon. And so this is where you really want to be intentional of, is that opportunity aligned with my strengths? Is that opportunity aligned with my values? Is that what I really need right now? Or is it ego driven? You know, there's a lot of that in our lives and in careers where we make choices on that. But this exploratory period can be very exciting. Then you'll see above there is what I call the transition eddy. So if you have ever felt during a transition that you're bouncing around to all these different points, the transition eddy may be at play, because as human beings, we want to know the right answer. And often we want it now. We don't want to sit in the goo of that regroup. We want to figure out what's next, and we want it happening now. So if you find that you're looping back over into struggle, regroup, explore, that's okay. It might be that you do need to revisit some ideas that maybe you were thinking about and it needs a little bit more thought, or you need to process emotions more before you're really able to commit to what's next. But if you're finding that you're looping again and again and you're stuck, then like an eddy in a river, you will probably need to have a bold decision or, really powering with your paddle out of it to move you forward. Because again, while reflection is really important for our learning and growth, it is also crucial to have action. If you're just thinking about it, oftentimes we will get into what's known as ruminating, or you're worrying about the future. And so this is where you might need a bold action to move you forward. When you get to a point of commit, it is where you have a decision that you're moving forward on something. This does not mean when you pick a direction, you're really excited about it, you're moving towards it, that there won't be challenges and there won't be detours and there won't be changes. There will be. It will just have a different energetic feel to it when you're moving through it than, say, struggle and regroup. Your energy is higher, but you need to direct it in a particular direction. Otherwise, you kind of will spin out because you're stuck in that explore space. Well, I could do this or I could do that, and you're not committing to a direction. And what I'd love to just underline here for the commit is it's not that whatever vision or goal that you identify for yourself is that it's going to turn out exactly like that. The power of commit and having a vision or having a goal is the energy that it causes you to have to get into action. Because just like the metaphor of the river, when we would be traveling in those channels, we couldn't possibly know what the other channels were ahead until we were in motion. So you can imagine it with that metaphor of, I'm picking this direction, I need to channel my energy into that direction and know that I may have to adapt and change as things show up, but the power of it is to get you into motion. And then one last thing I'd love to just mention is we're isolating this out for the sake of just orienting you and to give you a sense of what the experience might be like, and that it just gives you some information about, oh, I might be here and this is what I might need. But we are layered in transitions in our experiences. So it can often feel like there's never any stability because at some point in some way you are in a transition. So you have transitions in your personal life. And even if you're feeling stable in your personal life, there may be transitions in your work life. And then there's transitions at the community level and society and in our planet. And so there's all this layer of change and transition, and you may be at different places in this processing. And that can just feel like a lot. And we're going to give you the tools that can help you manage that reactive state and move into that creative state as you move forward. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions, or Heather, anything you
want. I was going to jump in. Well, because I'm just thinking of all the families that we serve the whole time that you're talking, and I'm probably thinking of it more with my wealth advisor hat on, but there's a couple things that I think are important because I think we have so many incredible clients that joined today that we serve all over the country. Is it okay? I have a couple questions when I think, and some of the things that we say is oftentimes we are stressing that patience in an impatient world, where we all sit on our phones and we get immediate results. We're trying to keep long-term financial goals and long-term financial independence that people have built over decades out of the noise of words like plummet and fall and soar that's today, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we're going to bring is really trying to hold the course, knowing that they're goals. What I always say is we have a 10 or 20 or 30-year horizon of what we're trying to create and develop and build. It's okay to have left turns. And maybe it's all the years that I've been doing it is to say, and I don't see left turns as bad, because sometimes something incredible that we couldn't even see comes out of a left turn. But I think one of the things that we say, at least from the financial perspective, and just I have two parts to this, but that is to say that and to say, and it's okay if we get to commit and we're in commit and a new opportunity or a new mindset, that was my point, comes to be, and we sort of go back into the loop, not stuck in the loop. I heard what you were saying, but say is just because we said I'm going to work this one job and I'm going to work there for exactly 30 years and I'm going to be exactly 62 with 85 points and 30 years of service. And then 5 years before that, the company's bought by another company and you get this opportunity. Flush it out with us. That's what I'm trying to say is in that change, know that we're a resource for that. But then the other thing is, could you just speak a moment to, if they do commit, And then they find, and this has happened to all of us, maybe that wasn't such a good move, which is why I think we try so hard to say, don't make quick decisions just to get out of indecision. It's okay to be in that space. It's okay to be in a space of uncertainty. We're all in that right now in the markets, right? And just holding that uncertainty to not make a decision that we would regret. Could you speak maybe just to that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I love about what you're sharing is it gives people perspective. So it's a point, whatever you're experiencing. I remember I was going through a really hard time, and a very wise woman told me it's only a point in time. It's a point in time. And I remember, and that sits with me, and it definitely is resonant here, that it's a point in time. And so rather than me getting really worked up about, I have to figure it all right now, and I'm in that reactive state, getting into that creative place. So to your point about commit, you may have committed and then something changes. You absolutely should be prepared. That's the whole point, is that you're prepared to adapt intentionally, and that you calm your, we're going to talk about regulating your system so that you can access your creative thinking, and then what are ways to help you think through creative ideas for paths forward. But it's simply be intentional about your choices as opposed to reactive on them. So patience is a great mantra. Sometimes we do need to move fast on things, but you can move fast with intention as opposed to, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do this and hope it all works together. You can move with intention, and it can be rapid, but more often than not, we have to slow down in order to speed up.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is what I say to so many of the people that we serve, and to my daughters and to my own self, very honestly, is be easy with yourself, be patient with yourself. In a world that creates, to me, undue urgency at times, not always, but a lot of times there's undue urgency. Give yourself the time and the patience and the grace to make the right decision. And so many times we're able to offer that perspective, because it's hard when you're just with yourself and you're trying to make a decision, because it feels so much more comfortable to have a decision made than live exactly what you shared with us in this transition, Eddie.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, and that moves us into this next part where I'm going to share some tools. There are so many more tools, and I have a number of practices and tools in my book if you're wanting more of that. But I wanted to give you a few samplings of things that can help you in that shift from being reactive to being creative. And I've bucketed them into 3 categories for today. One is about regulating your body, because we often will stay in our heads and we forget about our bodies, but our bodies and how our state is really driving so much of our behavior. You really do need to calm it so that you can have more access to that prefrontal cortex. And we're going to share a couple that can be useful for that. Refocusing. There's so much information we're getting. Refocusing on what matters and what's going to really help you leverage your energy use as opposed to spitting out on things that you don't have control over. And then reframe is that really thinking creatively about what could be next. How do you move forward in a really creative way? So we're going to start with regulate, and I'm going to begin with intentional breathing. So before I did the research on breathing, I would sometimes think it was patronizing for people to tell me, take a deep breath. And I would sometimes take the breath or I'd ignore them. But then I was really doing the research, and as I've been using it over the last 10 years with coaching clients and certainly for myself, it is the fastest way to calm your body. So if you do nothing else, or you take nothing else from the webinar today, that reminder of breathing is so crucial. But it's not just breathing, it's how you breathe, because obviously breathing keeps us alive, but there's different types of breathing that can be really valuable for regulating your system. And so when we are faced with uncertainty, again, if we're seeing that as a threat and we're in that fight, flight, freeze mode, then your breath will typically be more shallow and you are going to be in more of that rapid state. And you want to activate your rest and digest system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. When you inhale, you're actually bringing up your sympathetic nervous system, which is the one that's going to help you fight and flight. So you want your exhale to be longer than the inhale, because the exhale is what's activating that parasympathetic nervous system, or the rest and digest system. So we're actually going to do it, and please play along for those of you who are watching here, because I want you to feel the difference. So we're going to take 3 deep breaths. I want you to breathe in through your nose until your lungs are full. Hold it for a second or two, and then exhale, either through your nose or your mouth, longer than the inhale, which might be about 6 counts. So we'll go ahead and start now. And one more breath in. And last time. And I just want you to notice for yourself what difference is here now versus maybe a couple minutes ago. Because again, we can forget how we're breathing or don't even really notice it until we put some attention on it. For me, my body always feels like it does right now, more relaxed. And it's the brain telling your body it's okay. You want to be in that reactive state when a car is about to run you over because you want that fast reaction. But we tend to respond to market changes or the possibility of a job loss or the challenges in our relationships in the same way. And we really need to first calm ourselves so that we can think intentionally about what's next. The next one that I want to share is regarding, all of this, what I was talking about, being in our heads a lot. This is something I have to continually practice, and this is true for most people, is that you have to practice over and over again. You can learn these tools, and it's not enough to do one and then never again. It's like going to the gym once and thinking you're going to stay in shape. But during the pandemic, I was definitely not managing my stress very well. And I realized that I needed some more tools in my toolbox. So I signed up for a mindfulness course, and I'm laying in my, office at home and doing the body scan, and we're eating raisins intentionally, and we're doing different meditations. But one tool I found incredibly useful because it was so simple and quick to use. And that is the question of, where are my feet? And I had to laugh initially when the teacher asked that. I'm like, where are my feet? But it works because what it does is it takes your attention from overwhelming sensory or information to a neutral point of the soles of your feet and brings you back into your body and into the present moment. And there are variations of this that you can use where it might be putting your palms together. Like when I'm coaching leaders and organizations, when they're in a meeting, they don't have time, or the ability to do stretching or yoga or things like that in the moment. But this can bring you present. You can do that long exhale without being really loud. You can put your hands together. You can put your hands on your thighs. You can again ground into your feet. It's a way of bringing you present in your body. So those are just a couple of tools that might be useful for you. And I'm curious, what helps you calm down during a stressful, uncertain time? Something that you had planned goes awry and you're in that moment, you're trying to make decisions left and right, or you're feeling really reactive. What helps you calm down? So if you could answer in chat. And, we already have some, but Heather, do you want to share what's something that works for you?
So funny, the very first person typed nature.
Yes.
I was going to say the very first thing for me, which is just why I'm in Michigan and Chicago's beyond me with winter, but it's getting in nature. So I walk probably 360 days a year, unless it's just sleet, ice at the end of the day. And I just am talking, and my neighbors tell me my hands are going. But it's that way to just let the day go and be in nature and go out into fields and go out into it. I would love it to be a beach with a Mai Tai. Most days it is not. Also for me is taking a breath. And so when we get in the busyness of the day, when I say taking a breath, it's walking even around the outside. Get out of the office, walk down to the main floor. And this seems crazy, but you're in a rut. Like I can feel that circling. And I've even in the day went to my car, played a few songs, let the music resonate, caught my breath. I tend to eat at my desk, trying not to do that, like trying to separate from what is maybe causing stress or anxiety and get away from it. And then the yoga, which I talked about, I practice quite a few times a week, and I can go into class and I can feel what you said, my heart rate, my breathing rate. And I end the class, I'm like, I don't know why I was worried about that. I don't know why I had myself all worked up. So I think that whatever that is for you with body movement, I recommend it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're seeing a whole lot of
Yeah.
things in here where,
Yeah.
taking a walk, nature, and there is a lot of research that backs that up. And you probably have experienced this yourselves. When you are in nature, it is definitely calming. And there's even research that shows when you look at pictures of nature. So if you have some screensavers that have nature pictures on it, that can actually be calming for your body. There's meditation, quiet, deep breathing, and there are lots of different variations on the deep breathing. There's also connecting with other folks. What were you going to say, Heather?
I was just going to say the answers are just amazing and such great input. I mean, I'm just a lot with music, nature, all the art in all of our offices is nature. And so I said, we're not going to be an office with a TV screen when they come into the lobby with the tickers of the stock market.
No.
Me, why don't I just, take you out before you even get back? I want nature.
That's smart. You want them because you want them to make intentional choices. You don't want them to be in a reactive state.
Yeah.
So these are great. And I think if you have the ability to scan through these, get some ideas from other folks about what can help you calm, because that is such a crucial part of moving from reactive to creative. So we're going to move into our next one. So again, regulating your body. So just noticing, becoming aware of that is super important, and having practices and tools in place that can help you do that. The next bucket of information that I want to talk about is refocus. Again, we're going to get so much information coming at us, and we will try to think about or address all the things. And yet we are energetically exhausting ourselves if we don't focus on the things that we can control versus the things we can't control. So here's a simple exercise that I work with clients on. If you have a lot going on in your head right now, you're feeling overwhelmed by either your personal transition or the uncertainty of the world or whatever may be coming up for you, take out a sheet of paper and two columns. And on one column, jot down out of everything that's worrying that you can control or influence in some way. And then everything that is outside of your control in the other column. Because when it's stuck in our head and we're trying to hold it in our head, even if we're not quite aware of that, which is why that becoming present is so important, it is draining. So just even putting it on paper is in and of itself helpful. And then you want to focus on what you can control or influence. It's almost like, okay, the what I can't control, I'm just going to ignore for now, because this is the space that I can really make a difference in. And so here's some examples of what that could look like. So in the orange outside of what's outside of your control, but we tend to worry about, or we'll ruminate on, or we'll spend a lot of energetic capital on, and things like the weather, the traffic. When you're stuck in traffic and there's nothing you can do. What could you do? You could alert someone that you're going to be late. The economy, the stock market, the past, time passing, unexpected events, job markets. This is the stuff we don't have control over. And when I look at that, I physically feel really ratcheted up. If you are paying all of your energy towards those, you don't have the energy for the things that are in your control. So if you look in that circle, there is lots that we have control over. And it's calming, because when we have agency as human beings, when we feel like we can have some control over something, it is calming and energizing. So look at all the things that are inside that circle of what you do have control over. Your effort, asking for help, the actions, your response. You don't have any control over other people's response, but you do have the control over your response. And then a couple of things that are really crucial right now, working with my clients, are values and purpose alignment. So we've done a lot of work with a number of organizations around clarifying their values. And this is not just a shellac up on a wall and forget about. This is for you to keep referring to. And so many people are saying, whether it's for their organizations and in their leadership or for their personal life, when they have their values in uncertain, murky times, it gives you a frame by which to make decisions. And there's lots of research that shows that it puts you in a more creative, calmer state when you can identify and keep referring to those values. And then having a vision, again, like we were talking about in the commit part of that transition, having a vision will pull you forward. It doesn't mean that that vision won't change. The power is in the energy. And if you're lower in that curve, like you're in that struggle and regroup, you may not have a vision. That's just staying curious about what might emerge. But when you do have a vision, it will pull you forward. You just need to think creatively about what will get you there. And that's what we've got next, is reframing. So the final thing we'll go to before we open up things for some Q&A is reframing. So we've already covered the really thinking about how to regulate your body so you have access to that prefrontal cortex and you're not in that reactive state. Refocusing, where are you putting your attention and your energy? So you're really distinguishing between what you have control over and what you don't, and then putting that energy there. But then what is going to help you figure out those pathways through that winding river and the uncertainty ahead? You want to be creative about coming up with different ideas, because what has worked in the past for you is likely not to necessarily work in the future. When we're in high change, complex environments like we're in right now, it's different. So you need to be thinking about things in different ways. So one of the favorite reframing tools that I like is this idea of flip the framing. So a great example is Jerry and Monique Sternin in the early 1990s were working for the NGO Save the Children. And Save the Children was working with the government of Vietnam to help them reduce children's malnourishment. And yet the government said to the Sternins when they arrived and got off the plane and were, showed up at the office, they said, you have 6 months to fix, the malnourishment problem in the country, which is absurd in a timeline, right? So they had to think about things in a much different way than, okay, we've got this problem, how do we fix it, and do all this analysis and decide. So they thought about it in a different way. And so they changed the question from what's not working and how do we fix it to what's working and why. And so they worked with local staff and community members to identify, were there children who weren't malnourished? And what was happening that was different? And what they were finding were the moms of those kids were doing some unexpected things. They were giving their children things that were readily available and were nutritious, but weren't typically given to children, like sweet potato greens or tiny shrimp and crabs. And then they also gave their kids the meals in small doses over time, as opposed to one large meal, because that was easier for kids to digest and they were able to retain the nutrients longer. And so by improvising, these wonderful moms were coming up with, and just like we talked about, that creative capacity of taking what you have, rearranging it or approaching it in a new way so that you have something that works in that changing environment, they came up with something that worked. And so they did these small groups so that moms could share with other moms what they were doing. And the malnourishment in Vietnam's villages was reduced by 65 to 85% in 2 years, which was phenomenal. So this is something you can use also. We tend to think about, it's not that we don't want to ignore the problems. We have to understand what are the issues, but try reframing to, instead of what's not working and how do we fix that problem, to, well, what's working and why? What are those bright spots? So this is a good one that you can use at any point for whether it's in your organization, in your work, in your personal life. Just try that reframe, flip the framing. And then the second one is generating creative ideas. So again, you have a vision that you are holding and energetically pulling you forward, perhaps, or if you don't have it, be patient, watch and stay, open to the emergence of it, because you may be in a different part of that transition curve. But once you have some place that you're trying to go, or a solution that you're trying to come up with, or an idea that you're trying to come up with, oftentimes we might think if we think harder on it, we'll come up with the answer. And that might work for some folks, but what research shows and what I've personally experienced is that your most creative ideas are actually going to come when you aren't focused on it. But you got to do it intentionally. Again, that comes back to that creative state. And so this is how it works. So first you would be focusing on the situation, the problem, or the opportunity. Maybe asking yourself questions of how is this like situations I've faced in the past? How is it different? What are possible solutions? You're trying to make connections and bring things together in your mind in a new way. So you want to just focus on it as much as possible for a short period of time. And again, it will vary depending on what you're working on. But then you want to stop. And you want to put it aside and do something entirely different. Because what's happening when you're gardening or you're driving or you're taking a shower and you have that aha moment is your brain is subliminally making connections that you couldn't do consciously. It's also something that happens during the sleeping hours. So if those of you who remember your dreams, you might come up with this aha moment, and that's happened for a number of folks. In fact, Thomas Edison is said to have held a sheet of paper next to him when he would take naps because he knew that he had all these great ideas, but he wanted to capture them right afterwards. So you want to be prepared. You know that something's going to bubble up at some point, probably when you least expect it. So just paying attention to that and being open to it is part of that process. So before we move into the Q&A, I just want to say then that we've covered a few things. We've covered the really thinking about regulating your body. Do not forget that or underestimate it. Thinking about focusing on where you can put your energy that is actually going to be useful. And then some ideas for reframing. What could you do that could bring you into a more creative idea generation state? And in terms of resources, my book is there. So if you like some of this information and the tools, there's a lot more in terms of practices. Yes, thank you, Heather. Practices and tools in the book, and would love for you to check it out there. And then we also have Beacon Pointe's book on your dollars and our cents, and you can also check that out, which is going to give you some essentials of life and money. And so I'll just leave that up for a second before we move to Q&A. Heather, as we're getting ready to have a conversation with folks, I'll then move, because we have our contact information here. I'll leave that up for you, Heather, to talk about.
Yeah, this is just, I wanted you guys to have, and it'll be also on the Beacon Pointe website under WAI, our Women's Advisory Institute, this recording. So please have anyone that you feel could benefit join. But also I wanted you to have our contact information to email Jen directly, to email me directly. Of course, you can also link to any of our wealth advisors through all over the country, through all of Beacon Pointe. Many of them are on this call today. We are here to help you navigate this, but really a life coach. We're here from the financial arm. Jen's able to bring such a deeper perspective. This was just incredible. One of the ideas I had, and it's so funny, another wealth advisor that we work with is putting onto the chat. I was thinking the same thing when we were talking about generating ideas and being creative. There's not a week that goes by that I don't say I'm an out loud thinker. And I say it with okay, you guys know I'm an out loud thinker. And part of being an out loud thinker is I love other out loud thinkers hanging around me, because it's crazy how, and I don't know how many of us do this, but we have this preconceived notion of how it should go, that the should, or how we believe it's going to go. And you do this out loud thinking, and I surprise myself with this out loud thinking, but then all the incredible people around me, that it might be the smallest idea that then germinates into this incredible solution. So I was writing down, know your community. And the only other thing I was going to say when you were speaking, because I really worked on it in my 50s, and that is start with yes. And so many times we're busy, like especially in that transition, Eddie, where we believe we're overwhelmed. We believe we're out of solutions. We're really busy. Right at the time, I believe it's critical for us to say, yes, let's talk about it. Let's flesh that out. Let's open that up. We'll go internal and go to no. I don't have time. I can't look at that right now. And so what I've really worked on in this decade for myself, which I think has just been incredible for who we serve, incredible in my own life and for our team, is to start with yes. I might not be able to do it that moment, but your idea is important to me. I love it. I'm clearly stuck. Let's let's keep that conversation going, throw that to me, and then sticking with that. So I don't know if you've seen that be positive as well,
For
but I
sure.
know that sometimes if my creativity is low and I know it, it's when I need to reach to the rest of our team even more. And so
Absolutely.
I think we're getting a couple questions, Jen.
Yes, that's great.
All right. All right. So we have, our social handles. Oh boy. Can you answer? Or
Yeah, so it's at Jen Martin Co. for me, and it's also Jen Martin Co. at LinkedIn. And actually, I can go back up and send this. Well, while we can get those out as follow-up. It'll be when you get the follow-up recording, all of our information, the contact information is going to be included in there. And I did see a couple questions, like, so to your point, connecting with other people, we're mentioning that is such a crucial one. It's co-regulation. When you're with a supportive person, it'll support you in that regulation. And then idea generation is great. Reframing too is like, I can't do that. Add yet on the end. I can't do that yet. And it helps you reframe. It gets to that yes.
You may not be able to get to that now, but to leave it open was what I, like,
yes,
just leave that expansion. Like
yes.
This abundance versus scarcity, which is so much of what we share with clients when they're in a state of fear, a state of worry, is to try to be that inspiration to keep them in a mindset of abundance. We have a couple questions I want to
let's do it.
All right. How do you support someone going through a tough transition?
So I think, when you're going through the transition, there's all these different tools that you can use, and it's meeting them first where they are, which is why I think that transition change curve is helpful to assess, because how you approach the change is going to be a little different if you are in that struggle and you really need to process and come to terms with what's happening versus regroup, where you're having that patience and you're thinking through that, versus explore and coming up with the different ideas that might move you forward and commit. There was even a question that I saw in the chat of, if you have a vision, but you aren't, really, you get stuck. Like you have the vision, but you get stuck. So if you have the vision and you're more you kind of just get in the eddy, sometimes it's just break it down into a small next step. What's one step you can do today? Because again, when we get everything in our head of I need to be X or I need to be through this transition and it will look like Y, that's very overwhelming. So figuring out where people are, what are the practices and the tools and the framing that can help them figure out what's next and breaking it down into small steps.
I think that's so much of what we do, and oftentimes I'll draw right across my piece of paper a timeline. And sometimes just having someone with you saying, I'll say we can't eat an elephant in one day. This is an odd statement because you don't want to eat any part of an elephant, but large elephant in the room. And we know that we've got to overcome this hurdle. And I'll be like, let's break it out. Let's timeline it out. And that's a lot of what we're able to do through financial planning at Beacon Pointe as well. I also see this, and I'm going to speak to this first. How do you build or rebuild community when you're going through change? We have like 5 more questions.
Yes. Okay.
I want to speak to it for one moment because, again, I had 31 years of deep friendships and I landed at Beacon Pointe. And for me, I've always thought I need to welcome myself into a room. And so going up and saying hello to everybody, and it takes an immense amount of energy. I said, if you want to put on a comfortable shoe, I was in an uncomfortable shoe for this year, but being ready for that and knowing that the result of that would be, and I cannot share how many incredible friendships I've made just in 2.5 years, but for me, it was really welcoming myself into that and asking questions and being curious. And I am curious. And really knowing I'm not going to wait in a corner, truly. I'm going to put myself out there and volunteer and serve and do all I can to be of service and hopefully build connections through that.
Yeah. Community is, extraordinarily important always, but especially when you're going through transition. When you talk about building community, in the book, I talk about that you want to create a support network for you. It's your support crew. And you want to be thinking about that before you need it, but also, especially when you do need it, reaching out and asking for help. There's the core folks, the people who are going to be closest to you. That's only like 3 or 4 people. Like you don't have to have a massive amount of people, but these are the people who are with you through the thick and thin, no matter what. And then they're travel companions. Now that may change. So if you have people who are going through the same transition as you, or you seek them out, there's groups, there's different different things. That's powerful. Find other people. They may not be with you for life, but they'll be with you for that portion of your journey, and that's a gift to one another. And then the third one are guides. So that can be someone who maybe has been ahead of you or is able to provide support, like a coach or a mentor, and be thinking about it in those buckets of what do you need right now, and asking for what you need. I think, unfortunately, for women, sometimes we don't ask for what we need, and that's a key part of transitioning.
A couple more.
Okay.
Give you one more because it ties to this, and I'm going to
Okay.
jump to the one that they're asking about financial planning through transition. How do you redefine your sense of self after a divorce, widowhood, or your children leaving home? This is an incredible one.
Yeah.
Question.
I would say it's true for any time that you're reinventing yourself. You know, the situation will be different, you know, in terms of the context, but I talk about really anchoring into things that don't change, because relationships, even though they're powerful, they can change. Jobs, your role, your title, that can change. There can be a reorg, you can, you know, lose your job. So what we do have, again, control over, and that is very powerful for being creative, is knowing what your strengths are and your values, and being able to tie that to something that's needed in the world right now. So for you, for reinventing, it could be, if it is about relationships, what are the gifts that you personally have? Because it might feel like you don't have any gifts when you've been tethered to another person for a really long time. What do you value? And then again, finding you know, those connections of people who will allow you to evolve and not keep you stuck in who you've been.
I love that. And the one that wasn't in there, and I should have added it, it's what I do every day, retirement. You know, where, and this is for men and women, you know, you've defined yourself a certain way through your career, and you wake up, and especially if you had a big career, which is so many of the people that we serve, and the bulk of my practice, just because I've been here a long time, are retired or right on the precipice of retirement. And really talking through exactly what you said, we might, and this is also, I became an empty nester last year as well, all of these really, and a grandmother this year. I became all of it through this. And through all that, what are my passions? What brings me joy? What brings me vitality? And then the steps, it's almost when you were talking earlier in the call and you were saying, knowing your core values, your core passions, what's important to you, what drives you. And I almost get this feeling, and I'll tell this to clients right here when it's off. And I won't, in a spidey sense of, that doesn't resonate with what's important to me, and I have a limited amount of time, and I want to dedicate it in a specific way. Okay, so then they're speaking about what role can financial plan, this is what we do.
Yes, and well, and that probably is the last one, because I know that we're coming to time, so you take it.
Yeah, a confident transition. All right, this is what we do. So what I try to say is, we're here to provide options. We're here to give you, and it ties to this very last question, which is, if I'm an overthinker, how can I get comfortable and confident in making a move? So those two tie together, is to allow us, we're able to run a variety of scenarios. It's tailored to you, not our thoughts, but tailored to what's important to you. And then flesh out all the options and all the avenues in a good market or a bad market or a tariff market or a win market like last year. Like markets, like you said, they come and go, but consistently they do this over time. And I have just a lot of peace and confidence in that. But also to say, all right, do we want to readjust the plan? Things have changed in our markets. What does our income plan look like? What does our income strategy look like? What does college education planning look like? What does legacy planning look like? Let us stand beside you to help you create a life path to honor all of the things that are important to you. And then I'll often say, I think women can have everything. We just can't have it all at once. We can't have it all at the same time. And so I'm a big believer in, we can do all of it. But we might have to decide what's most important and what resonates loudest, because sometimes there are decisions along the way. So, well, this is amazing. We went right to the hour. It was so good to be with you. It's so good to be with all of you that we can't see. And I hope that so many of the people that you know listen to it, because Jen, it was just so inspirational to me. I've really enjoyed your book and getting to know you, and thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. It was great to be with all of you. Thank you so much.